What's up, guys? Real 2K Insider here, doing my first video for NBA 2K25. Today we're doing a little something different. We're going to be ranking every single point guard in the NBA, and I'm going to be doing it using the tier list that I've more or less developed and based on what 2K does, 2K Sports. So just explaining that the ranges for all of the overall ratings. There is actually a system that they use. They're just really bad at implementing it for their own rosters. So 95 to 99, those players are going to be the MVP tier. 90 to 94 is the superstar tier. Generally, your all NBA players are going to be in this range. 85 to 89 is going to be all stars. 80 to 84, like your starters. 75 to 79 is going to be role players, but there are enough of these guys that we're actually going to split this into two separate tiers. And then 70 to 74, those are your fringe players, third stringers, etc. Anything below that, 65 to 69 generally, those are like your G League players, mostly on two-way contracts. You're not going to have a ton of those guys on standard NBA contracts, but there might be a few that we discuss later on in this video. So with that out of the way, that's the tier system. There are other players that are not going to be mentioned in this video. We do have to make a distinction for the point guard position versus the shooting guard position. And there's a little bit of gray area with positions. And I typically use lineup data. So the most important thing is, or the most important players that won't be ranked in this video are going to be Kyrie Irving has been starting at two guard next to Luka Doncic the entire year. He could play point guard for the vast majority of teams in the NBA, but functionally, based on how they deploy their lineups, he's been a two guard, which I can get a little bit into how the lineup stuff works. Also, and then Jamal Murray would be another key example. He's been the point guard for the Nuggets for a long time, but this year they put Russell Westbrook into the starting lineup really about like 6 weeks ago, I think, and the Nuggets have been playing really well. So I think that Murray's just going to stay in the starting lineup as a two guard for the rest of the year. So that's why he's here. And then other players like Malik Monk played a lot of point guard, backing up De'Aaron Fox, but now he's in the starting lineup. Jaden Ivey's a little some gray area, especially since Cade Cunningham being so big. Defensively, he's really like a three. You can get away with playing like another point guard sized guy out there. Josh Giddey's another one who's not going to be on this list. We'll get into that later. Marcus Smart. And then towards the lower end of the spectrum, we have Jaden Hardy, who's a combo guard. And then Bronny James actually will not be part of this, as he's mostly been a two guard in both the NBA and G League. But let's get it underway. And with all the red tape out of the way, the MVP bracket, which is your 95s to 99s. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, no surprise that he's going to be the number one rated point guard. I have no qualms about having a 99 overall, by the way, compared to 2K Sports. I don't think it's some forbidden rating. He's top two for MVP this year. It's between him and Nikola Jokic, basically. He's been All-NBA first team the last 2 years, going for number 3 this year, obviously. Easily the best guard in the NBA right now. A lot of similarities to late 90s Michael Jordan. He's an elite two-way guy, can't be stopped as a driver, gets to his spot, not a great three-point shooter, and his team's on a 70-win pace. So they also have the number one defense in the NBA, despite his big men, Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, missing most of the year, and that's because he's such a good defensive player. Doesn't get nearly enough credit, I think, from like all defensive voting and whatnot. And then I just think that's very self-explanatory. Luka Doncic would be the next guy in the MVP combo. He's always in the MVP combo. All NBA first team for the past 5 seasons. But he's dealing with injuries this season. He's only played 22 games so far. So his All NBA streak is going to come to an end. His overall production was down a tick. His usage rate's been down. Wasn't drawing as many fouls. So he is a little bit lower than I had him last year, which makes sense if he's playing with nagging injuries. I think last year I did have him at a 99 or 98. So just a little lower than he was last year, but still somebody I would consider in the MVP bracket. And then we have a 3 point separation between the next tier, which is the 90 to 95, or sorry, 90 to 94s, the superstar bracket. We've got Jalen Brunson and Steph Curry at the top of that. Brunson last year was All NBA second team, finished fifth in MVP voting, and I actually had him in the MVP bracket last year at like a 95. He's not putting up the same raw numbers this year, but that's because he's playing with Karl Anthony Towns. Last season, Brunson, a big part of why he was so high in the MVP voting and made an All NBA second team was he averaged 31 points a game last season after the All-Star break. Noteworthy that the Knicks were playing without Julius Randle in that second half. He really had to do everything for that Knicks team, and he hasn't had to do that this year with the Knicks as he's more or less shared the load with Cat. So still great, just not at the absolute peak that I had him last year, but certainly at the top of this bracket, and definitely somebody I would consider the best guard in the East. And then we've got Steph Curry, still the best shooter on the planet. Warriors have cratered since November, but that's not really his fault. He was All NBA third team last year. He and Brunson both were voted All-Star Game starters, coincidentally. 2K, by the way, has him at 95 in the next tier above. I don't think he's really in the MVP conversation. Certainly if the team isn't winning like it was before, but he didn't rank in MVP voting last year either. So, but he's like he gets the eternal pass from them because of he's the greatest shooter of all time. So he's always going to be in that bracket. But I just have him a tick below. He's not he's 36 now, so he shouldn't be rated as high as he was 25 and 26-year-olds like Shea and Luka who were in their primes. And then under that, just a tick, is Dame Lillard, who has basically been Curry light for his entire career. Also, All NBA third team last year, along with Curry, and I think it's just fair for him to be below Brunson and Curry. He is the number 2 guy on his team with Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Bucks have been playing really well this year, so I've definitely had Dame lower during the season at the start of it, but since they've rebounded, he's crawled his way back up to a 93, basically playing about as well as he did in his last year with the Blazers, if memory serves. Although I can't remember. He was also insane that last year with the Blazers, so that may not entirely be true. But I think he's a leg above some of the other guys in the rest of this bracket. The rest of these guys just all kind of clumped together. And I guess the list goes down even more. There's 10 guys in this bracket, I should mention, which is a lot. It's the most of all of the positions. And this is going to affect the rankings a little bit. We see I have 10 guys in this tier. Can I fit them all on the screen? Yeah, I can. All right. Darius Garland, comeback player of the year. He's up 2 tiers from last year. I had him like an 84. Donovan Mitchell has the name recognition, but Garland's been the best guard on the East's best team this year. And I would say he's probably been a little bit better than Dame, if we're being honest. But Dame is the all-time resume, one of the best shooters ever. And Garland's team is deeper than the Bucks, so I think it's fair that his numbers are, or his tier placement is just a tick lower. LaMelo Ball is another interesting one. He's putting together a ridiculous season. He leads the league in usage. He only played a combined 58 games in the prior 2 seasons. He's a better player now than he was when he was an All-Star in 2002. I would honestly leave him off. I know the All-Star selections are going to get named for the reserves, I believe on Thursday. And I would, even though I have him higher rated than some of these guys, because of like the team success aspect, I would snub LaMelo in favor of these other guys. Because he is leading the league in usage, but he's not really elevating his team in doing so. And he puts up good, like, strong assist numbers, but it kind of reminds me of Stephon Marbury a couple years ago. It's like Stephon Marbury versus Jason Kidd. Those were the top 2 guys in assists like 20 years ago. But the manner in which he gets his assists, like, is He's like driving kicking rather than like getting guys for like easy baskets. Nobody on the Hornets is really like thriving with LaMelo, I want to say. Whereas like guys like on the Bucks, I didn't get into this before, but guys like Taurean Prince is shooting a career high, like 46% from three, I want to say. Somebody else is having a career year on that team as well. I'm drawing a blank on it. Gary Trent. Gary Trent is shooting a career high. After having a nightmare start to the season, Gary Trent is shooting like 44% from three as another one. So there's not really anybody on the Hornets who you could say is having a career year. I guess Mark Williams is playing really well right now, but I don't know if that's because he's been a very dominating post presence, not necessarily because LaMelo is like setting him up. But focusing on the rest of the guys under that, that's just my take. If LaMelo makes it, the All Star game is not the end of the world. I would just take guys like Halliburton and Cunningham. I would take over him because their teams are playing a little better. And even Trae Young, his team is in ninth versus the 13th is a big difference. Um, Speaking of Cade, I guess the Pistons are currently sixth in the East. They have 23 or 24 wins after collecting only 14 last season. They've taken a step forward on both ends, or he's taken a step forward on both ends, I should say. Which again I touched on before. He's the size of a small forward. He's a really good shot blocker for a guard. Kind of the same build. Like I could see him having the same two-way level of production like a Shea Gilgeous Alexander does. Tyrese Halliburton's a player that I had in the superstar tier last year. He was All NBA third last season, but he played hurt last year, so he could hit the 65 game rule. He needed to play 65 games in order for him to get the supermax, and because he played hurt, it's affected him this season. He hasn't had the same level of burst or aggression since the first half of last season, so that's why he's dropped down a little bit. But he's still probably the best pure playmaker in the NBA. Has a 4.8 assist to turnover ratio. So even though he doesn't have the raw assist numbers that like a LaMelo Ball or a Trae Young does, he takes care of the ball much more than they do. And the Pacers are playing great right now. He's obviously still a big part of that. Trae Young, for what it's worth, I have Trae Young at the bottom of this tier at a 90, and they have him at the top of their tier. They have all the rest of these guys at like a 92. They have Dame at a 91, Brunson at a 92, Trae Young at a 92. I don't think that Trae Young and Brunson are particularly close. So I have Trae at the bottom of this tier. He leads the league in assist rate, but hasn't been efficient shooting the ball this year. And obviously he's playing better defensively, but he's just never going to be an impact player there. So that's definitely where players like Cade can make up ground on him. And I think Fox has been solid, but the Kings have had like a tale of two seasons. He's still recovering from the malaise that he had playing for Mike Brown. Probably the next time that I update this list, maybe a month from now, he'd probably be in like that 91 range with Garland if he keeps playing well. And then going on to the next tier, we have the All-Star tier. I have 7 players in this tier as opposed to 10 for superstars, which I guess is kind of noteworthy. There are some really high-level players at this position. And really, I for other positions, it makes sense to separate these into 2 tiers. Like 85 to 87, I would consider the low all-stars, where like fringe all-stars, whereas like 88 to 89, those are the guys who are closer to being in that superstar bracket. There's only one of those, Tyrese Maxey, who he's having a good year by the numbers, but the Sixers haven't had the same level of impact, and his numbers are slightly down from last year when he was an all-star and the most improved player. So he's a tick lower than he was last season. And I guess worth noting the number 13 point guard in the NBA. So the top 13 in this at this position, they're all 89 overall or better. That's going to factor in once we do tier lists for other positions. Point guard is just stacked, man. And then we have a little bit of separation before we get to the rest of the bracket, 87s to 85s. James Harden and Tyler Hero, like they're having really good years. Harden's kind of having a little bit of a bounce back. playing for the Clippers. He's got the ball. He's doing more with the ball than he had to the last 2 years. With Philly, he was more or less feeding Joel Embiid, and then with the Clippers, he was sharing the court with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Obviously, a different dynamic this year, where Paul George got left in free agency, and Kawhi Leonard missed the first half of the season. So Harden's been a little bit inefficient, shooting like 39% from the field, but he's really good on that step back three. And still a pretty good playmaker. And he's not as bad defensively as he's made out to be. He is physically strong, 6'5", 220. The Clippers are the #2 defensive team in the NBA, so he hasn't hurt them on that end, certainly. Which you could make an argument that he definitely was during like his Houston days when he was doing everything on offense and sleeping on backdoor cuts and stuff with the Rockets. Tyler Hero, he's new to this tier. He's taken a step forward in Miami, filling the void left by whatever Jimmy Butler has been doing this year. Jalen Suggs and Drew Holiday, these guys were both all defense last year. Historically speaking, I equate all defense to being on par with an all-star selection, as generally all defense guys. Those guys aren't getting the recognition that they deserve, but they are extremely valuable when building your team. Obviously, the Drew Holiday joining the Celtics was essentially what propelled them to the championship last season. And Jalen Suggs, he came back from he just came back from injury. Although he sat out the last game that they played, Orlando went 2-8 without him, even though they got back Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner from injury during that stretch. And he was the guy who kept them afloat record-wise while those two guys were sidelines. So it's pretty fair to say that he's their most important player, and that's something that certainly reflects with his overall rating. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We've got effectively the top 20 fall into this range. CP3, he's back here in this tier after coming off the bench in Golden State last year. Huge part of San Antonio's success. He's not a volume scorer by any stretch, averaging only 9 points per game, but still one of the smartest players ever. Solid defensively. He has a 5-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, similar to Tyrese Halliburton, which is hugely important when you're trying to maximize a future all-time great in Victor Wembanyama. So it was good to see Chris back here. He's 39, so he doesn't have a ton of time left. And it kind of remains to be seen. I don't anticipate the Spurs are going to trade him to a contender or anything, but certainly that is a possibility if that's something he wants. Going on to the next tier, we've got the high starters, or really the starters, but we're going to break this down into 2 tiers because there are 15 players across it. And I do think there is a little bit of a distinction for... one thing that you can actually notice on this list is the salary ranges for these players. As we go further down the list, you're going to notice that the salary structure declines. That is something that overall rating does calculate in. It's part of the calculation for that in 2K. What the AI is going to offer these guys in free agents. So gameplay wise, this is why overall is important to be able to manage. Although this isn't really a 2K gameplay video, I just wanted to break down all of the point guards using the 2K rating. This 2K rating I think is pretty accurate to how I view these players tier wise in real life. The other positions, there are some quibbles that I would have with the formulas, but I think point guard's really strong, which is why I wanted to start off with this position. But going through Jordan Poole and Fred VanVleet, those are both the 84s in my roster. Poole's having a career year, hitting 40% from 3 after a down year last season, the highest assist rate of his career. He was almost not in this ranking because he'd been starting at shooting guard for most of the year next to Bubba Carrington, similar to why I don't have Jamal Murray here. But CC Carrington, he just hit the bench 2 games ago. So I had Poole at 2 guard when I initially did the write-up for this, and then I checked the box score today, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta make the adjustment to this before I go live with it. So, the reason why I have Poole as the 2 guard also is because Brogdon was the starting point guard when healthy. He's also part of this tier. Brogdon probably not with the team after the deadline, so who knows? He's currently sidelined with injury right now. Like, check back in a month. Positions are much more fluid in the NBA these days than what they used to be. So right now I have Poole at point guard, but if Brogdon comes back and he's starting at point guard, I'll probably move Poole back to the 2. All right. Fred VanVleet, former All-Star, big part of Houston's success, although his overall production is down from where it was last year. Last year he would have been in the above tier. And then Russell Westbrook, as we mentioned, with Jamal Murray, he took over as Denver's starting point guard about a month ago. He's been a revelation for them. Steal of the offseason, only making the minimum. Has a player option for this offseason, so he can get paid more if he wants to with the Nuggets, or sign with another team. But I have a feeling that he'll probably be with the Nuggets for the rest of his career, or at least until if he ever declines, because he has been an Iron Man throughout his career. And he's been playing at the same level that he has over the past 3 seasons, for what it's worth. He was the starter with the Clippers after he got traded from the Lakers, but then the following year he had to go back to the bench because he couldn't play with Harden at all. He was the starter at the start of the year, and then they acquired Harden in trade, and he was basically one of the better backup point guards in the NBA last season, but just didn't have the minutes available to him. And then that's essentially a big part of why he had to join the Nuggets on such a low salary, because nobody really wanted him as a starter. But now he's playing at a high level again. So Austin Reeves, he's fought hard to get to this point. He was an undrafted player. Van Vliet also undrafted, probably not a coincidence. It's probably fair to say that this is the absolute ceiling for undrafted guys who aren't the most athletic, don't have the greatest defensive tools. Reeves is never going to be a great two-way player or anything, because he doesn't have the wingspan for it, and he's not a super athlete. And at 26, he's more or less in his athletic prime, so he's probably not going to get much better than this. 20 and he's the 22nd best point guard in the NBA. I would say he's got a super team-friendly deal, and they partly signed him with the intention, I think, of trading him for a better player. But he's improved since he got that contract, so he's on such a good value deal that I don't think Jeannie Buss would actually trade him, because he's came up through the organization, and B, he's such a good value that she's cheap as hell. So I don't anticipate them moving, and they're not actually trying to pursue a championship or anything. It's kind of tough to be a championship contender when Austin Reeves is your third best player. They're kind of in no man's land with that. But that's going a little deeper out of the realm of just strictly a point guard ranking podcast. Malcolm Brogdon, who we touched on a little earlier, he's been a forgotten man since getting traded from the Celtics. He was the sixth man of the year for the Celtics 2 years ago, and he's basically been in exile since the Drew Holiday trade. Played for Portland last year before going down with injury. He's only played 18 games for the Wizards this year. And I would consider him on par with Austin Reeves, at least when he's healthy. Reeves obviously has a lot more durability going for him. That's always been Brogdon's knock. So maybe he ends up on getting traded or bought out or something, with the trade deadline around the corner. So we will see. And then going down to, so that was the high starters, and then your average starters, we're going to go to the 82s. There's a lot of backups in this range. All the best backups in this range: Peyton Pritchard, Dennis Schroeder, Ty Jerome, TJ McConnell, and Jose Alvarado all fall into this range. 5 of the 15 players in this range are backups. That's worth noting. And these guys, they all, for the most part, they have starter level of impact, but they're better in limited minutes. TJ McConnell is a great playmaker, but he can't shoot. Ty Jerome is a great shooter, but he can't defend. Alvarado is a really good 3-and-D player, but he can't finish the rim or anything. And it's also worth noting that even though these guys are all backups, they actually like functionally are seventh men rather than sixth men, with the exception of Peyton Pritchard. Pritchard is the only guy getting starter, like, or I guess sixth man minutes at 28 minutes a game because partly because he plays next to Drew Holiday and Derek White, who can guard up a position and allow him to like get on the court. But like because there are so many high level point guards in the NBA, like these guys are all playing 30 to 35 minutes a game. So especially if you're playing with a guy like a Trey Young or a De'Aaron Fox, you can't really justify playing like you lose too much on the defensive end playing an undersized guy next to them. I guess T.J. McConnell and like Halliburton would be like a good example of that. Or Ty Jerome, you can't really play him a ton next to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Like Garland and Mitchell's minutes are actually being limited, like just to get them through the season. And Jerome has been a huge part of why they've been so good because he's been so good offensively. Uh, by the way, like also along with Russell Westbrook, steal of the season. Like he was signed last season as like a nothing but huge improvement for him this year. It's a huge bargain for them. He's going to be a player who's a free agent at the end of the year, and let's take a look at there might be a few teams that like can offer him a much larger role. Um, I think where do I have it in my notes? I think like 8 of the players in this range are free agents at the end of the year. I guess we can actually review that. Tyus Jones, Ty Jerome, Schroeder, Russell, Brogdon, Westbrook can opt out. So yeah, there's a lot of guys who could be changing teams. Dennis Schroeder is a player also who um, he almost wasn't in this ranking, but then because he had been starting at 2 guard next to Steph Curry, which I thought was just awful because he's not a 2 guard at all. Uh, he like I don't understand what Kerr's obsession with like I guess I don't know, like Poole and Curry played well together, but Schroeder's just like not that level of player, and maybe it like helps protect Steph on the defensive end, but I don't know. I just didn't see it. Like when they had Chris Paul and Steph on the same team last year, I don't get the theory of the concept. So Schroeder was awful. He was really good with the Nets as a starter, and then he got traded to the Warriors, and they continued to start him, but it just didn't work, and he got demoted to the bench. So that's why I had him at 2 guard until like today when I realized that oh shit they made the switch, and I'm thrilled with that because he should be part of this list. He is a natural point guard. And he would be he's a starting caliber point guard, but like low end starter. There aren't a ton of teams that because there's so many high level point guards that like you can't really be a contender and start these low end guys. There's just like too many. You're leaving too much on the table having a lower end point guard as your starter if you're going to be a contender. D'Angelo Russell is another such player. He was traded by the Lakers in order to clear the path for Reeves. He could be on the move at the deadline again. He's just kind of biding his time with the Nets. They don't have him in like their long-term plans or anything, I don't think. Um, Emmanuel Quickly, he's had a nightmare season. Only 9 games played for him. Tyus Jones, he had to take the minimum this year because to that point about teams not, contenders don't want him as a starter and he wants to start. So like, but only the lottery teams are going to be able to offer him like the minutes and the money. So you kind of had to choose. He ended up taking a minimum deal with the Phoenix Suns, who they may not even be a playoff team, the way things are going. But he's another player. Like I think he's like the 26th best starter in the NBA, if my tallies are correct. Tyus Jones, Kobe White, Dante DiVincenzo, these are your 26th to 28th best starters in the NBA. DiVincenzo isn't really a point guard. He's been forced into action there due to age-related decline of Mike Conley, who we'll get to in a bit. Currently sidelined due to turf toe, so Conley's back in the starting lineup. Minnesota would actually be one of those teams that would be thrilled to have one of these lower end starters. Although it is worth noting that they did have D'Angelo Russell already, and they gave him the boot. like a high volume shooting guard who's going to dominate the ball. Or rather, I should say, like a high volume shooting guard like Anthony Edwards isn't the easiest player to fit a ball dominant point guard around. Um, hey, remember when they drafted Tyus Jones? They could probably hell for him the starting job this offseason, given he has a little bit of similarities to Mike Conley. But they just couldn't offer that to him this season just because Conley was still so good. They had to kind of naturally wait for him to fall off before they could take away his starting job. White, for what it's worth, more of a natural combo guard. He's hurt right now, and when I realized that Lonzo Ball was the one who replaced him in the starting lineup rather than Ayo Dosunmu, who was a two guard, that's when I realized that, like, oh shoot, they're playing Lonzo next to Giddey, and that's like ultimately why I think lineup wise, White is quote unquote the point guard. Like defensively, he's the point guard on that team. Giddey right now is actually starting at the four with Patrick Williams coming off the bench as of their last game. So that was ultimately why I moved White here and why he's on this list rather than Giddey. If Giddey was here, he would have been in this tier. Another player who would have been in this tier is Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart, career point guard for the most part, was supposed to replace Dylan Brooks in Memphis as a 3-and-D guy, but then played mostly point guard last year with Ja missing most of the year. And he just hasn't been able to stay on the court. Probably getting traded. They kind of consider him like dead money at this point, and they haven't needed him at all this year. Memphis has. So, especially also with the growth of Scottie Pippen Jr., who we're going to get to in the next tier. Functionally a point guard, but playing off guard, Marcus Smart is. So he's playing off guard in their team's rotations, which is why I've got him there and why he's not in this tier. But check back after the trade deadline. He'll probably be back here. Going on to the next tier, we got the role players. There's 31 players in the role player distinction. That's deep enough that we can break that into two tiers. Starting off with the 79s to 78s, which I would consider high role players. We've got Mike Conley and Keontae George rounding out the last of the starting point guards for their teams. Worth noting that other positions, the lowest rated starters, are much lower than a 79, so that just speaks to the depth of the position. Players like, for example, at small forward and shooting guard, like Ryan Dunn, Josh Green, Zachary Risache with the Hawks, Andre Jackson Jr. with the Bucks. Like, those are like fringe level starters. There's nobody at the point guard position who's really at that level. Although, as I say this, it's worth noting that Keontae George came off the bench in the last game and they started Isaiah Collier. Isaiah Collier would easily be, like, he's worse than Andre Jackson Jr. He's not at all, like, they're just throwing minute. Like, Utah's just, like, tank. Like, they're not losing enough games. Like, they're doing everything they can and just develop, you know. I think Collier's better than what he's shown. He has a 5 PER this season. He's been extremely turnover prone, hasn't shot at the ball well at all. We'll get to Collier when we get a couple tiers down, I think. But George, I just wanted to note that he did lose his starting job. And it's like worth noting that like he's kind of been gifted minutes. I would be playing Colin Sexton here. I guess Sexton's another player who I didn't mention as like players who could be in this tier, but he's been playing two guard most of his career. But he's improved his point guard skills anytime they have to play him there. Like he you know, the team plays well. They basically had to bench him last year, or I think they were 500 at the deadline last year, and then he got hurt. And, like they were holding guys out so that they could secure their tank. Sexton's another guy like post trade deadline. If he ends up on a veteran team, you know, maybe he gets his position changed. I Sorry, I'm reading whatever I wrote in my notes no longer applies. All right, Scottie Pippen Jr. Has been an invaluable spot starter for Memphis, but he's definitely a backup. He would get exposed as a full-time starter. But similar player to like Jose Alvarado, I would say. They're basically the top two like defensive playmaking point guards in the NBA. Spencer Dinwiddie, he's likewise done a fair job filling in for Luka, much in the same way that like Scottie's been filling in for Ja. Also, he was a starter for the Nets last year at 31 years of age. He's just another player who's kind of trending downward. Terry Rozier, he lost his starting job, and basically to Tyler Hero, they moved Hero over so that they could start Duncan Robinson next to him. Kind of a similar situation to D'Angelo Russell, where they moved Austin Reeves over after they demoted him. Trey Jones was he was a fringe starter last year with the Spurs. Obviously, as soon as the moment they got Chris Paul, they were like, yeah, we're starting Chris Paul. Sorry. Payne and Mann are among the better offensive backups. The Hornets have really missed Trey Mann this year. And then rounding out, I guess Scoot. I've got Scoot notes. I think I've lost wherever my Scoot notes were. Yeah, Scoot. He briefly entered the starting. Oh God, did I go over Anthony Simons? Yeah, Anthony Simons is another one who he lost the position briefly to Scoot, or Scoot started and they moved Simons to two guard. But right now, Scoot's back on the bench. He's been okay. He's another guy that kind of gets gifted minutes. If he played for Utah, he would be starting. But Chauncey Billups is making Scoot earn it a little bit. He gifted him minutes last season and he was terrible. So he just kind of hasn't really developed in his 2 seasons in the league. And then only 2 guys at 78, Cole Anthony and Anthony Black, who both play for the same team. They're both cannibalizing each other's playing time, essentially. And kind of fortunate that Jalen Suggs, well, I guess not, the team wasn't fortunate, but each of their, Cole Anthony was fortunate that there were all these injuries, because he was on the complete outskirts of the rotation, getting 9 minutes a game prior to all the injuries. And he was a starter earlier in his career, but he just hasn't improved at all, and he doesn't bring anything to the table besides shot creation. And shot creation, surprise, surprise, isn't that valuable. The value of it declines the better that your team is, because unless you're the best shot creator on the team, what are you really doing otherwise? And Anthony Black, I think he's the biggest point guard. He's Cade size, right? Defensive player, but obviously nowhere near the offensive game of Cade as of yet. And then let's jump on into the next tier, or the next half of the tier, which is the low role players. And you'll notice something with a lot of the salaries. We're now in minimum contract territory, aside from players who've declined off of that. Obviously, Lonzo Ball and Ben Simmons dealt with injuries. But yeah, we've got guys kind of in that mid-level here, unless they're on their rookie deals, in that $9 to $10 million range. But as soon as you get down here, we're now in minimum territory, which is something, if you're a 2K developer and watching my video, maybe you should factor this into how you scale your salary cap structure in the game. But again, we're focusing just on the point guards and how I'm tiering them out. So yeah, the 77s, Kevin Porter Jr., Marcus Sasser, Davion Mitchell. I don't have a ton of notes for these guys. Kevin Porter Jr. had a higher rating with the Houston Rockets when he was, he had free reign to do whatever the hell he wanted. Now he's a backup with the Clippers, behind James Harden, ahead of Bones Highland. What a place to be. Sasser's kind of he's the backup to Cade, but also kind of the third string, because Jaden Ivey plays a lot of point guard on this team. So he's a guy that right now is benefiting from Ivey's absence. So hopefully for his, for the sake of his career, he wants to make a little bit of headway and earn consistent rotation minutes. Davion Mitchell is a guy who's more or less benefited from quickly being out for most of the year, but it is very telling that at one point they were starting Scotty Barnes at point guard rather than starting Mitchell, because Mitchell's just he's subpar offensively. He doesn't really bring them a team much there. And then we get to the 76s and 75s. Lonzo Ball, he's been okay since coming back from injury. He's kind of playing his way back in. Ben Simmons is a really interesting guy, and I guess before we get into that, just like with these tiers, as we mentioned, like the seventh men are essentially in that 80s tier because they're not really getting sixth man minutes. The guys in this tier are all like eighth and ninth men for the most part. Um, and then when you get to like 75s, those are basically your 10th men in rotations. But Ben Simmons, he's been in and out of the lineup with the Nets, like health wise. Basically, right. Although you say health wise, I feel like they're kind of like he's been alternating starts with D'Lo. I think is partly like a way to keep like both of their trade values like high-ish. Probably looking at a buyout at the after the deadline. There's an outside chance that he could be part of like some crazy Jimmy Butler trade or whatever. He makes 40 million, so he'd be salary matching. But after the deadline, he's probably going to get bought out. And love him or hate Ben Simmons. I'm sure most people hate him, but like he's a very flawed player, but he can definitely help a team. He's a great passer and defender. He's basically a 6'10" TJ McConnell. Like McConnell can't shoot either, but like Simmons' woes are obviously a bit more extreme. Like TJ can at least keep a defense honest outside of 10 feet, but like staying healthy is the biggest thing for Ben. Kind of similar to like Jonathan Isaac with Orlando, who like missed most of like 3 years. Like at the minimum, he's fine. At 40 million, this is terrible, but at the minimum, with the rest of like the guys in this tier, like teams would love to have Ben Simmons, I think. And then Lonzo Ball's also a guy to keep an eye on at the deadline for the same reason. Contenders aren't interested in him. He's a former starter, but just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But he like whatever he's lost athletically, he still has a great IQ, and the 3 point shot hasn't gone in it for him at the level that like it has previously. But I think that's pretty rehabable. I think. And then the rest of the tier, like Aaron Holiday, Monte Morris, these guys are just like backups, Delano Banton, etc. And then we get to the 75s. Like Kyle Lowry has been terrible. So, like he was really hot like the first 2 weeks of the season, and then just completely fell off the map. He's shot like 28% from the field or some crazy number like that since then. I don't know. I guess it's worth talking about the two ways. There are four two-way players in this tier. Um, the Ryan Rollins, AG Mitchell, Drew Smith, and Jared Butler. These are guys who basically earned standard contracts with the level of their play. They're in their team rotations. Butler kind of sort of on the outskirts of it now that they're playing like Jordan Poole as the starting point guard and they're bringing Carrington off the bench. There aren't as many minutes for Butler. He's probably back to being like third string territory. But starting at the top, Rollins, he basically beat out DeLon Wright for the backup point guard spot in Milwaukee. He's going to end up on a standard contract. I keep referencing the standard contract thing because two-way players are not playoff eligible. They needed to be on players to be playoff eligible need to be on a standard contract. They need to be part of the main roster, not on like your baseball equivalent of a minor league contract. So, and then they have a 50-game limit on like games that they can play, which not coincidentally is like approximately the trade deadline or like All-Star break number of games. So you got the first half of the season to figure out whether or not these guys are in your plans or not. In the case of Rollins, he's going to get converted. They're going to clear a roster spot, probably moving Marjan Beauchamp to someone. Drew Smith, he's a player who like typically would have gotten convert. I think he got converted last year, and then they re-signed. He got hurt last year. He tore his ACL, I believe, or he tore his ACL this year. Whatever it was, like he's had two season-ending injuries the last 2 years. He was on the way to getting converted this year, but he ended up getting hurt, and they ended up bringing up Keshad Johnson instead. So really unfortunate break for Smith. I still think that they could convert him at the end of the year, similar to what they did with like Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn in years past, just to have like the team control on him moving forward. AJ Mitchell's another guy. He's hurt right now. Probably not coming back until April, but because the Thunder, they're going to be on a deep playoff run, they expect to be playing games in June, so he's definitely getting converted when they clear like a roster spot or whatever. And then Jared Butler, he's probably played better than Carrington. Carrington has been terrible, which we'll get into when I break down the rookies who were in this tier. he's another guy who probably, once Brogdon gets moved or some of the vets that they'll move. Um, he thought the Wizards have been tanking. Now, just wait, just you wait to see what they look like in March and April. But going over the rest of the rookies, I guess Craig Porter Jr. is also worth touching on. He's the only non-rotation player that's in this bracket, and that's partly because like Ty Jerome has been awesome and Darius Garland has been awesome, and both those guys missed time with injuries, which is how Porter Jr. got that chance last year and got converted from the two-way. So he's a great insurance policy for the Cavs. I don't think he's gotten worse or anything. He's just not playing because there's so many other guys on the team better than him right now. But he's another example of like guys in this tier, the two-way guys who like earn rotation spots and get converted. Um, but then going over the rookies, Devin Carter, he just came back from injury. Actually, let's start with Carrington because he's playing the most minutes. He's been mostly starting in Malcolm Brogdon's absence, but he's been terrible. Only 40% from the field in a very low usage role. Big reason why the Wizards are 6 and 38, 30th in net rating, 30th in offensive rating, 30th in defensive rating. He's only 19, but clearly just not ready for a 30-minute per game role. Rob Dillingham, also only 19, but not quite ready to take over for Mike Conley. I think like he'd probably be in a similar position with Carrington if they were drafted by different teams. Like Carrington would be the one barely playing, and Dillingham would be the one getting like 30 minutes per game. Devin Carter, on the other hand, he's a little older. He's 22. He is NBA ready, but he's just working his way back from injury. He missed the last 6 months after having surgery. So he's somebody that as soon as he came back, he leaped over Jordan McLaughlin in the rotation, and then Gabe Vincent has just been god awful, basically since signing his contract with the Lakers and leaving the Heat. Going over into the next tier, which is the fringe, we got 20 guys in this range. Well, technically 39 if you count the two ways. Like how I bracket these guys, I do like make a distinction between the what's it called, the thirds, the guys on standard contracts and the guys on two-way contracts, just because of that that playoff distinction. Those guys are on minor league deals, etc. But there are like 40, close to 40 of these guys. A part of why my 2K roster content is not as frequent, because it's like the sheer amount of guys that you have to like really go through is has exponentially increased in the 20 years that I've been doing this. But just going over the two-way guys, Vit Krejci he's actually starting at small forward with Zachary Risache sidelined with injury right now, but he's also Trae Young's backup, and they don't have anyone else with Kobe Buffkin's injury, who we'll get to in a bit. Where is he? Vasa Micic. He's shot the ball terribly in Charlotte, only 34% from the field. Big part of why they're so bad without LaMelo. They really missed Trey Mann this season. Shake Milton was in the rotation for the Nets, although he's now on the outskirts of the rotation with the Lakers. For the most part, everybody else is it's like combinations of veteran point guards who are on their last legs, like Reggie Jackson, DeLon Wright, or it's like young guys who just haven't really, they have like critical flaws to their game, so they haven't really been able to establish themselves. Or they're mainly just like not good enough offensively to contribute. Looking at like the rookies who are probably the most interesting guys in this tier, Reed Shepherd has been dismal at the NBA level in limited minutes, but he blew up 49 points in his G League debut. He has by far the most starter equity of anyone in this tier. He just has no path to minutes. Again, like using the Carrington example, if he was getting 30 minutes a game like Bub Carrington, I highly doubt he's only played 350 minutes or so for the Rockets this year. I don't care if he's shooting only like 30% from the field, 20% from three in only 350 minutes in like mostly garbage time. Like that doesn't really matter to me. Like give him consistent role and minutes, and like he's going to play a lot better than that. But because he's not playing at all, He just has to be kind of down here. Nikola Topic is there. He is. Um, he's out for the year. Probably should be a tick higher than this, but he's also only 19, so like, yeah, he hasn't shown anything at the NBA level. So like, I didn't want to really overthink it, but he's a guy who they anticipate like he's long term going to be the backup um, for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Although AJ Mitchell might have something to say about that. Isaiah Collier, we mentioned earlier that like he's now starting at point guard, but he's not he has not been good. Don't want to dive too deep into the numbers there. Tyler Kolek is probably the most NBA ready guy on like of all of the point guards who were drafted. He is 23. Um, but he's really just Jalen Brunson insurance, and Brunson's only missed one game this year, so he's just mostly been in the G League, so just hasn't really gotten a chance to show anything at the NBA level. I think that's all the rookies. Caton Wallace, I think he's technically a rookie. Um, he's another guy that he's kind of been playing himself. He'll probably end up on a standard contract as well. He's been filling in for like the Hawks have had injuries to like Trae Young and Kobe Buffkin throughout the year. Buffkin is out for the year again. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's only played like 20% of his potential games in his career. Probably a good chance that his fourth year option gets declined because he's just not worth. $4 million is a lot. It's double the minimum for a guy who just and he's older than some of the other guys on this list. So we'll see. Blake Wesley's another guy that like his fourth year option's probably getting declined because you can't justify playing. He hasn't really developed offensively. He's just kind of a backup defensive guard. I think that's all I want to talk about with the guys in this tier. Patty Mills is the lowest rated veteran. He's strictly a locker room guy. Teams are generally just going to be shooting a little higher with their third string point guards, as we'll notice. Most of the guys in this range were development guys or guys who kind of fell into this tier. If you're in your 30s and you're in this tier, you should be worried. You're probably not going to be on an NBA team next year unless people personally like you. And then everything other than that is for the most part just the two ways. The handful of standard contract guys. Where is what's his name? AJ Johnson. I don't see AJ Johnson. Oh, there he is. Sorry, AJ Johnson. He's only a 70 overall, so just a 70. Like he hasn't played in the NBA at all. He's been like strictly G League and similar to Tyler Kolek, but unlike Kolek, he is 4 years younger. He's extremely raw at 19, so it just makes sense to have him like all the way down here with the rest of the G Leaguers. And then I mentioned that Bronny James is not part of this ranking because I moved him to two guard. He is a 69 overall, so he does fall into that like G League tier. And Jalen Hood-Schifino has barely played. I think he's only played one game at the NBA level this year. 2 games in the 2 games in the G League, I think. 1 game in the NBA. After barely playing last year. Like he was brutal last year, and then he got hurt. So he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He had his fourth year option declined. He's probably looking at like 2-way contracts for like the rest of his, not the rest of his career, but like for next season. I don't think anybody's going to offer him anything more than a camp deal. Really unfortunate turn of events for him. I like him. I did a scout on him. There are a lot of similarities to like a Spencer Dinwiddie. And worth noting that Spencer Dinwiddie ended up having a similar career path where Dinwiddie's career was also like almost ended due to injuries, and he had to kind of work his way back into the league a little bit. Like he on like make good camp deals and whatnot. So hopefully Hood-Schifino can turn it around, but I do have him as the lowest rated standard contract player in the NBA. As far as I guess the rest of the 2 ways, it is worth noting that like Tristan Newton and KJ Simpson were both. Those are the only second rounders that are on 2-way contracts. I think Simpson has a decent chance at getting converted. He's got a little bit of upside. And probably maybe if they can find a taker for like Vasa Micic, um, in like a trade or anything, because he's kind of looking like dead money at 9 million, and they can give the Hornets are in tank town, so he's going to get his opportunity. Simpson will to like show some stuff. He showed a little bit when LaMelo missed a few games earlier in the year. But yeah, that's the point guard tier. Nothing really else to discuss here. Hope you guys enjoyed this content. Let me know what position you would like me to tackle next. It's probably going to be the two guards, um, but we'll see. Um, if you, I am going to be starting over the Patreon. I emailed. Patreon discontinued the monthly, not the monthly, the pay per post model that I had implemented. So I submitted a thing that like I am going to be switching to the standard like monthly things, because they are discontinuing the pay per month model entirely and like converting all accounts to the paper the monthly like at the end of the year. So I just wanted to get ahead of that. I haven't heard back from them yet. So once I do, I will be really re-releasing the spreadsheet via Patreon. Otherwise, if you wanted to like um, throw me something on PayPal, um, you can reach out to me at thereal2kinsider at gmail.com, or on Twitter at real2kinsider. I'm working on Blue Sky, or leave a comment here if you're interested, and I'll reach out to you if you want to get my roster spreadsheet, which is super in depth. I update I did all the ratings and badges for every single point guard in the game. So that's why I ended up releasing this list. I went meticulously through every player, so that's why I felt very confident and good about this. I feel like this is the best like position ranking that I've ever done in 20 years. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Anyway, this video's almost close to an hour, so let's wrap it up. If you liked it, hit that like button, share it to your followers on Facebook, Discord, YouTube, etc. Subscribe on YouTube. Blah 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 blah. I hate self promotion. So I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Peace.